Oh, you're still right.
Alright.
Oh, they do.
Y'all good?
Yeah.
Gabby good? The advantage is warming is essential. Unturned threshold is not too late. Every current madness lettuce. 20 heat zone stream. You will survive. You food web C 70 to your hotter than the last ocean fully. A nox signal within ocean death. Like a poison sulfide. Bits in atmosphere. Attacks the ozone. On the lipids. Bombarded by UVA. Desert. Satan. Into North Europe. Russia. Canada. Heat zone. Sensitive. Sensitive. Evaporate. Source. Are by the way to dust. And even been so much so. We trigger cancer under the ground. Here. Saying no one knows what the threshold lies be. Much easier to initiate than thought. A shape will trip the worth of its water. The burning. The lower investments. On also will take us. Their cooling classes. Up dissipation with CO2. When CO2. Threshold is crossed by standard cumulus breakup. The temperature rise by 8 degrees. Decided. The feedback pushes 0 over 2 greenhouse state. The more we keep rotary constantly. The closer we get to this tipping point of heralding the sense of the entire planet. Half a degree makes a huge difference. 1.7 billion clouds, doubling the plants that lose. The breeze decline 90%. Half a degree makes a difference between the extinction of an ecosystem that we're not yet doomed. There are pathways, geothermal, wind, solar, nuclear. We can reduce consumption of less, which to electric central later never will be. Just 1.5 better, 2, so 2 is better than 2.5. So on. Tipping points are likely and catastrophic spread. 23 systems can be stable once the region later change alters the system. The 2 prevent all rising temperature need to be limited to 1 degree of the current at 1 point. 2 added 1 century of heavy points when the warming of the self-reinforcing the was not about lack of knowledge. The system will change when wind models are not capturing all the resistance that covers the South Ocean, AMOC, Arctic ice sheet when the foundation societies are threatened. The lower pressure resistance not appropriate given the uncertainties high and possibilities we sure receive special attention to the worst case adaptations unsustainable. McLaughlin 24 the IT climate will not lead to collapse as a currency for example even 30 degrees up the people would grow crops in their main places so I've been AC countries would die of the treat of those get some claims about it climate first Searches climate in that threat. It's a line of contesting claims there. It's like a research on higher chance that this could lead to should speed cautious climate scientists believe. They claim they're seriously misguided and the more likely climate might increase animal common disease or spread. A secret to collapse the system is not enough to track by the concurrent growth attack whether humans could adapt it or whether food is pending appearance outside of the possible extinction change current low temps and the opponents has got some steps from confidence that the health future news will not be severe adaptation failure risks or near term extinction level cuddling coast. 23 consider global catastrophe and lives of people today. The climate change we see the situation we have the sunlight but starvation, destruction, disease, and war, meteor of life. Severe risk of climate poses in the short-term infrastructure not built with safe frequency for weather, aging, grid is vulnerable. We experience loss of foods and adds the water and waste systems, AC and lighting, airlines, satellites, and GPS transported pipelines, and magnifies all other extra risk. Camp 23 large what may not be needed to trigger catastrophic cascaded still exists. ISS or have been at least convincing analysis of this is inside the numerical figures based on realized studies and analogous Permian. His the assessment was compelling. It has the most thorough grounding in the face of uncertainty. It will have the most reliable precedent. Some extinction cannot be ruled out. 4 degrees of warming, hurricane hitting YC, and NATO destroys the global SAI intention to some resistance studies to wash away this info by defects nuclear war breaks down unstirring nuclear war atmosphere shots affected by acidification or changes while other trigger new pandemics on planet evacuation by a safety facility led to release of modified smallpox virus are resilient but fail humanity is extinguished. Emissions alone trigger acidification which causes global fish population gotta 23 of the ocean acidity the biology of the sea leads to coercive habitats on the drops in metabolic rates and this will threaten the whole ocean food chain. The population of fishes when the acidification affected 40% of the global population mitigating GHG. The solution billions are dependent on the ocean sources. Extinction crib 23 company regime with the food shortage leading disputes over when fish existential threat. Nuclear company limited conflict had killed 2 billion as the nuclear winter becomes causes harvest to fail would trigger further wars. Some nuclear as time of weapon falls into the hands of warlords. Academic debate is required to build social consensus on the validity of climate science. Hoffman 12 I don't begin with I think scientific review of the process of carbon wind on the temperatures of the whole could be using conveyor lines attacks on blasted fire solar for those who made it he turned back. That's why he content someone to destroy the economy by teaching environmental issues that are to be buy ticket to hardly leading Thomas Santos and Humberts at first I could see a beat in switch more thought and more began to see him he was speaking from because it's world I did not agree with there's no doubt scientific consensus on climate change assessment is endorsed by every national scientific agencies and ecology social conditions and climate change that exists. American public believe no climate change has declined with 2/3 of Americans not understanding science were able to pass up literacy test how people interpret opinions of scientific opinion debate over climate change debate over culture worldviews and ideology the great danger of attacking partisan divisions that debate will take it from us logicism the tendency to divide on the greater giving greater weight to evidence and arguments and climate change existential challenges their convey worldviews the climate change and the ultimate common problem there every individual has debate here has concept that the costs are borne by all those who develop the global institutions that reflect the average condition of the climate change access the last 150 complex what is formed but this logic might already say the evidence form is what people don't have to change values of all the considered form of all regional societal debate focus on the scope of dimensions the problem the feasibility of solutions and discussion must move beyond a strict focus scientists to conclude its cultural underpinning how much science can be visited not as binary yes no question but a series of questions associated with uncertainty the probability of the challenge becomes unfairly complex scientific issues the way that laid audience can hear the looking for reason to be hopeful about climate change looking for public defense statements we can't use and having made recognize the lane public rejection conclusions all but though through legal debate over values and social trends emerge when the first topical is powerful lobby official more secondary the social consensus by carbon needed from all layers of society, particularly the social side material and absence of the climate being driven by structural and institutional controls, elevating climate change to an extra threat, reflects consensus and motivates change, not apathy. Davidson, 23 scientists call reform exploration, the extinction of Brazil, and that's the same rewarding out of catastrophic climate, climate, the critics claim the discussion of extreme versus flawed and counterproductive of these concerns and convincing there's no reason considering extreme risk of slowly carbonization, lack of risk, assessments, low action, create faulty policies. There is no, these are stronger that considering risk leads to apathy. The recent analysis concludes behavior-based messaging is effective at changing attitude, behavior, and there were no observed situation counterproductive echoes wider. The literature on fear, the idea that fear breed fatalism needs greater nuance. Thus, the plan of the United States federal government should adopt a substantial carbon price. Finally, solvency first, energy demand. Trillions of daily decisions do not reflect the cost of carbon, but the tax notifies consumers to reduce emissions. 23, where the carbon tax is to mitigate power in whether way is easiest consumers can pay. Mass transit carbon will self-pay view close to get a fuel efficient engine drive a hybrid of the EV, so it's all solar, low climate if I keep on the efficient plants to turn off lights when they leave and use efficient bulbs, better insulation, heat less, need and more. Insurance every day they reduce carbon, only a tax and data fossil fuel demand drill. 21, government can not identify every conceivable energy saving practice, having the carbon impact demand generally reducing emissions over time and tax would encourage efficient vehicles, reduce miles traveled, and the drive many modest steps towards by consumers on energy consumption while access to electricity is small and the short run quite high in the long run. This is eligible given the risk with climate change. Economy-wide cost is key. It forces internalization of climate risk. 21, there's a bucket tax over the law of climate to be and price of the transaction best fixed is a price for carbon monthly economy-wide reducing emissions. The price aligns incentives by business individuals with low carbon land apply energy efficiency and within allowed or legal challenges can put us under past 200 targets about our border adjustment will induce will have the countries US at 300% more carbon efficient than China. India and Russia second, low carbon innovation. It must be a cost-effective market certainty is key. Match good. 20. Has to work immediately on the wall couple starts to the year independent cord. The contracts will give. See as the pass decarbonization to their boards. Benefits will be playing. Companies want to hasten, want to the transition, but need market certainty to invest with confidence. Certainty comes from carbon price, not CNC. The companies will provide low carbon goods for consumers searching for market share. 25 hours avocado path into parasite sale. The where pricing is uncertainty. The private sector will be chasing opportunity to consider compliance. Congress has this constitutional power to lay tax at the most conservative judiciary. Hard subject to a tax on carbon. B tech neutral. Only a tax overcomes balancing failure. White 20 carbon price will facilitate balancing resources. Means that they will require less revenue of the to fall because missing money in markets will fall. And as price the signal become clear, uncertainty should fall. When the sun doesn't shine or wind doesn't blow, having compressed provides a signal for flexible resources to be a carbon free that we don't know what tech you need. It could be hydrogen on the gas or sequestration carbon price to help guide innovation with how you get segments of tech without full market. Third, international emissions, a trade sick is key. Evolve. 21, the nation will follow suit to consider climate policy in response to a CBA. The US with the carbon price of border depth that would push the world to commit in line with keeping warming below 1.5 threshold. Those interesting emissions and trade will have big implications in the integrated world. A global price very difficult. Countries have different priorities. Consideration global pricing is not realistic, but border adjustment will push the world to a meaningful price. Border adjustment solves leakage, incentivizes global action. 22 border adjustment grants the manufacturer moving overseas where the Sweden believe EU has their own adjustment. I'm the China Russia always talking about data, but also talking about in-house pricing responses, how we get other sites considered to see those fees within their own treasuries of the country will be lining up and look at their own candidate. We're talking in the US and they're really hard without a price on carbon video WTO compliant without the what about China and India excuse we can inspire our countries to produce CO reductions. Fourth, efficient abatement and economy-wide cost of carbon makes it most efficient emissions reduction. Vandenberg 24, the critics start New Orleans mentioned the effect of the economy-wide effects order matters as the cost of emissions reduction change over time and as costs only when tech has a proven pricing dealing with millions of emitters efficient. Policy to legalize the direction, hyper political support, heterogeneity, then having options of what makes unified pricing useful ensures the low carbon cost solutions elected as the policy reach polluter sector result in arbitrary and inconsistent policy resulting in higher costs and reduction carbon price to reduce emissions effectively the electric price of the carbon content of energy source and different agents to reduce emissions as long as price exceeds the marginal abatement the least flexibility key to optimal policy. The plan's push on supply and demand maximizes emissions reductions. Vandenberg 24, carbon price at source the non carbon use of life cycle would be flexible how prices see all decision by producers to low carbon option effect achieves effect system effectiveness on alternative instruments where it focuses on one phase where standard shifts off adoption pricing moderate production emissions as well as intensity of use more subtle and accurate incentive for low carbon behavioral changes on the hard signals on the record by number of scientists and activists on the critics questions specific category pricing impacts on low carbon innovation power literature by theoretical support that higher prices of an input encourage favor factor saving innovation higher the price the more innovation accelerated and unlocks gradual decarbonization. Vandenberg 21 gradual but steady emissions reduction goals it's a pricing cannot transfer system at the per page by consumers affirm in all sectors of price pricing critical innovation see low carbon option private investor driven by price expectation the pricing encourage low carbon fuel panel CVs price capable of control the direction emissions matter for deep carb the guarantees are larger for effective emission prices of private continuous financial incentive limit of rebound and further domino effects prices activate social speed point of root sugar low carbon choices the firms do not achieve reductions the price to translate into more expensive final goods automatically discourage demand so trying to achieve with all improvements as firms only pass cost of their own abatement not embodied emissions.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. You levy carbon tax, how much?
I don't think there's like a specific like numerical price. Rather, it is
Why?
determined based. Well, Because the price and the social cost of carbon obviously fluctuates.
Oh,
so
it's based off the social cost of carbon.
well,
it's the social
no,
cost
the
of
cost
carbon.
of carbon and the impact of that fluctuates. So
How
it'd be
do
a calculation by
Okay,
certain science.
totally agree. When I see Skizzer 23 says the regulator's most important job is to estimate the externalities as accurate as possible and price them in. How do they estimate those externalities?
I'm obviously not a climate scientist,
Okay.
so I don't know exactly how that is measured.
But
the
it
Shizer
is
evidence-
important because you just indicated that the rate of the carbon tax is contingent on the cost of those things. How?
Sure. I think the costs that would be included are things like the adverse effects of temperature increases,
Okay, how
things
do
like how innovations would be destroyed, companies would be destroyed, cities would
Yep.
be destroyed, etc. are probably
Innovations
examples.
destroyed. All right. So, but I guess how do they estimate those costs?
I don't
Because-
know like the specific
Okay.
mathematical formula. I think that those are
Okay.
the scientists that have called for the carbon tax would be the ones that would be
Oh.
able to do that.
The scientists that called for the carbon tax do that. Which scientists called for the carbon tax?
I don't know specific scientists
Okay.
off the top of my head. That's
Yeah.
like obviously a pedantic question.
Okay, that's fine. The tag of this card is that a tax notifies customers to reduce emissions. How so?
The Shizer evidence is very specific about how a tax causes an internalizing of the cost of carbon and causes changes in the life practices. It says things
Okay,
like
like to what?
buying an EV, reducing heat,
Okay.
etc. Or the lines in the paragraph that the card says.
So those are sufficient to resolve climate
Well,
change.
no, it's not
Oh.
like I buy an EV automatically climate change is zero, but rather that a massive change in consumer decisions as well as company decisions is able to catalyze a change that reduces emissions overall to prevent existential warming.
Okay. Yeah. The Hoffman evidence kind of I think follows here in terms of the change in consumer decisions. You say that when it says quote when analyzing complex scientific information, people are boundedly rational. How do we know that this is true?
Ethan?
Sorry, I missed the last part of that question.
Quote, when analyzing complex scientific information, people are boundedly rational. Why do we know this is true?
So that's an underlined portion of the card.
And it
The
is
body
crucial
of
to the claim
card-
that it makes. And
I
also the
don't
claim
really
of the
think
plan,
it's
and
the-
also the
it's
claim of your
part-
solvency, because you said that a tax notifies customers to reduce emissions by changing their practices. How are
Yes,
people
this
boundedly
part
rational?
of
How
the
do we know
card
this?
says people give equal weight or prioritize things like evidence and arguments when evaluating things, and so they seek science. They like
Okay,
push
so
for the
people
best
seek
backing
the
of
claim is
argument.
that people are boundedly rational because people seek science. Okay, that's fine. The Davidson card says we conclude by talking about a climate risk realist framing. What is a climate risk realist framing?
Probably a framing that analyzes the threats of climate change in a realist form. So like the way that it increases tipping points, increase like catastrophic risks, destroy cities,
So
cause
what does it
wars,
mean to do
increase
this in a
conflict.
realist form?
I don't know like exactly
Is
the
the
specific
one
words.
AC
It defines
is
it
the
as
one
a
AC
person
an
who
exi-
sees catastrophe as
is-
one potential future that should
Is the
be
one AC
avoided.
an example of that?
We think,
Yes,
yes.
we should avoid climate change.
The one in C is almost sent, no, it is sent, order is one off case. That's just okay. Alright. People have it?
No, sorry, I just
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
The world computer is an autopoietic machine of sense, making that correlates life and ontology, reach into the past and future to liquidate life and bring it into alignment with its brutal colonial logics. Its power of extraction works to expand the system of global parasite and manifest a racial unconscious that overdetermines rational epistemology itself. You may think you think, but the world computer thinks through you, Bauer 18. Capital Marx, the onset is the first universalizing digital culture, computational racial capitalism, and abstract machine that evolves out of concrete circumstances, iterate on life, reorganizing its corrosive effect on ontology, computation, conceptualization, machine sense making become a separate computation, not the ways the universe per se, but rather is the ways the universe has become intelligible to us. We see what we can with the senses we have. We build machines that discern the universe functions in accord with the self-same-modic recursivity effects the culture translating the scale into the domain of history reveals the disturbing origins of the computational conscious to global apartheid. Reality is science fiction, fiction to author is science. The world begins to look much like the tools we use to perceive it. Reality is thus a simulation that seems to align the immediate colonial history of its emergence. The emergence of tools that perception is taken as universal liquidity and historical agency as sound, the sedimented dead labor inherent in computation. No matter how disappeared those bodies may now seem, rational epistemology is no longer separable from the history of computing. We may think we think autonomously, but the historically materialized digital infrastructure sinks in and through us as well. Society overdetermined theory and thought. Information formed by the statistical basis became a global episteme. Military and industrial applications separable from the production resonate with the analysis of logistics, ways of organizing life, social production, orchestrating meaning, and constitutes the unconscious. All apparatuses are calculating artificial intelligence, thinking in numbers, overrides historical thinking, computational functions enforce infrastructural inequalities, racism, sexism, homophobia, and programmatically unequal access to life, curse of society, cellular colonialism, police brutality, drone strikes, catastrophes, both unnatural and purportedly natural. The machine has a political ontology. To universalize contemporary subjectivity is to naturalize history, to depoliticize it, and therefore recapitulate its violence in the present. And though I see the global scale of reference paved the way for particular narrow climate imaginary that writes its truth into being, legitimizing particular narratives as facts and particular scales as important as carbon mathematics counts missions to reduce and resecure the power of the global technosphere. Beirut 17. Mathematics, the mathematics of CO2 functions as a universal equivalent that enables commensuration, different processes, objects, and matters that retain power over its creators to make the world speak in a particular way. Climate change is planetary, not directly available to experience, only knowable through computer models. Shared framework binds the calculative logic of climate to hierarchical orderings of globalization to make models of work. What is required is a calculable proxy. CO2 is used to think and see climate frame, how we understand and act on it. So shapes the environmental practice. First, it produces a global scale of reference. Second, it creates a framework for political action. Count emissions to reduce them. Emissions work particular infrastructure as politically important mathematical terms now stand under and they speak to an implicit reference progress. Here's the legitimate the action framing is both practical and necessary. The framing effect is to make cars and power stations fungible, disentangling them from their socio-material relations to make it appear as though there is a consensus about objectives of environmental politics. This reinforces the autonomy of the global technosphere, undermines justice, obscure and invalidate other modes of political agency and knowledge, suggests justice will be an outcome of getting climate as much calculative activism, make some locations worthier targets for politics than others, mobilize the commentator globalist logic where the abstract is more powerful and valid than what is cast as local. This invalidates and obscures non-calculative processes and practices producing something that's representable in others' opaque, private, and consequential nature. The state makes society legible to ease with management, violently remaking people in nature, requires top-down techno-scientific vision, progress, and marries rational planning with fantasies of mastery in nature, and an authoritarian state making facts into particular kinds of concerns framed as technical questions. The local state of the political action has been measured in parts per million and found one of God's effective visions of hope for the future histories and ways of being all negated in the carbon gate. And the archive of information and data created through carbon markets writes some lives as collateral damage. It extends the genocidal calculations of the world computer across space and time and reverberates across social infrastructure as subjugation becomes the cause and effect of the liquidation and consumption of populations. Pits count 22. Financial modes do not just model the world, but produce techniques of governance that constitute the reality of the model. Certainty over the future requires no knowledge because it is investors who will adapt to this measuring risk will force them to, even they need not know how. Price reflects the climate reality. Market establishes the basis for modes of impersonal domination. Transition gets abstracted into financial figures, technologies that do not yet exist that manage discontent. Climate data gives investors a sense of how climate risk, right opportunities, and for regions key to flood, to raise insurance premiums in the area, shifts investment in industries that will absorb population refinements are infinite, like life insurance based on prediction of exposure, booming or declining industries, air conditioning and construction up, cold down, the value loss according to types of people that die, expected loss of incomes across demographics and the demand commodities they consume. Portfolio managers move investments in accordance with the algo model climate scenarios, optimize the profit from shifting climate information, saturated signals, internalize climate externalities, they modulate allocation of resources automatically across networks of data, lighting on the islands of profitable assets drifting onwards towards the pole of computational reasoning. And the IC's commitment to extinction politics is a commitment to genocide. Its calculative logic is not as content neutral as they believe it. The hegemonic power to dictate what modes of politics appear as sinkable mystifies the eugenic, irrational base at its heart. Davidson 22. Extinction politics and emergent mode politics are certain arguments are hegemonic. A concern is measuring and aggregating life at the level of the mass people and optimizing life expectancy. The test to defend the population from collective risk subject is the species not the only present but also in the future. An example, a nuclear war that kills 99% and another that kills 100%. There's a qualitative difference to suggest risk focused on survival of the species, safeguarding for the potential ability in the future lives, maximizing utility across the population. The figure of one part of the population may be dependent on the demise of another part in zero-sum game of deciding who's able to live and who must die. Certain people die, especially those in the death world as a colonial zone, so that that others survive. This logic is mirrored by extinctive politics. About political task of disrupting value and utility means the future is a stronghold on the present. Extinctive politics involves the power to foster life or disallow it to the point of death. People in the present may be sacrificed to increase the utility of the future. There is eugenesis current to the image of the future, dependent on avoiding accidental risks. There is a key concern with circulation of risk, aggregating information to predict, prevent, and regulate threats. There is an actuarial logic concerned with assigning people probabilities to catastrophic dangers. The risk that ultimately matters is those that have the capacity to cause extinction. Other forms of risk, even ones that cause marks the card at forms of risk. Cool. The alternative means, although the alternative sees as a means of informatic reproduction, this refusal is an invitation to make a wager on something else. An alternative set of death was a different return that gestures towards a horizon that cannot be computed within a regime of value production platformed on colonial racial violence. Valor 23. Computational capital system work as a transfer existential semiotic field in which the bodies of the other has become currency and create the binding contracts in the world. Are you afraid of dying? The frontier of death is daily. The goes of value iterating recursively through a world of history have done their work. Imperative to stave off themselves as organized space-time under the reign of epistemology and cosmology built on violence and necropolitical signifying backed by violence. Produces innovation by means of vernaculars and power written on the flesh, procuring deliverables. We're at the center of the unsolvable. You can't even understand how widespread the problem is. We're on hell as the framework of the rules of law, freedom for self, subjugation for the other, sovereignty for self by means of sovereignty for the other is a standard. The alphabet and capitalist contradictions on the people of the world is a convenient regime. The truth and reality bank on death. Such is innovation. We urgently need to extricate the body from the media discourse that spectralizes it so we might depict all of its importance. If we re-ontologize the body, we might be able to re-semanticize the power of death and capitalist patriarchal frameworks. This is a re-semantization of the body, and its pain will emerge from language, critique, and performative practice developed in public space and through queer multitudes. When there are no other options, we must transform the soul option not into withdrawal or death, but re-significations, re-sync our very self. Subaltern agency may be found in temporalities of remainder life. Information must be challenged by altering the structure of agency and the domain, the meaning and computability, altering motive and scriptural legibility, datification, and relation to make poor reversal, values of liberation persistent in organizational modes, reimagining value as the forefront. We create social currencies informed by intersubjective agreements, endowed with agency, new technicity emerge from subaltern strategies. The oppressed denominate values of expressive, qualitative, future writing form, not just new types of writing, but new media, backwards conviviality, and radical hysteria instead of found in violence. And on case interpretation, teams must specify the rate of taxation, otherwise we get access to indents of all carbon taxes because they haven't said how they're different from those in the OAC. Don't let them shift from the 2AC, kills negative ground. And carbon tax is historical and theoretical too, so they go and make things worse by obscuring the real cause and solution necessary to avoid catastrophic tipping points and extinction, i.e. N17. Taxes can never undermine the conditions existing. Carbon taxes can encourage capital to add renewables, but cannot force it to abandon the cheap labor resources and fossil fuels to make all remaining oil of the ground. Carbon taxes are intrinsically linked to energy markets, brutal extraction, colonialism, and destruction. Believes that a tax is a possible danger that detracts from the deep changes necessary. The taxes have never achieved transformations of the magnitude required by the carbon crisis. On the face with tax, corporations raise prices, lower wages, bust unions, validate contracts, increase working hours, more operations, duplication with cheaper overhead costs, lower wages, taxes, environmental regulations. Corporations lie about protecting emissions or commit fraud after the fact widespread in EU ETS or subsidies to counteract taxes. Carbon taxes not polluter pays consumers, workers, and local communities pay with their livelihoods. Carbon tax proposals divide communities and social movements, promises of revenue, quota resistance, put communities in difficult situations into impossible one set of infrastructure that usher carbon trading. And the AFF is counterinsurgent colonial lies. Pedro and Wilkins 424. Green imperialism as a mechanism to perpetuate cap, a reformist and counterinsurgent agenda connected to a view of nature monetized and exchangeable, aims to preserve the imperial mode of living at the expense of the periphery. Green imperialism uses justification of environmental benefit. This conservative logic, conservationist logic serves corporations. In Tanzania and Kenya, predicted areas have been militarized into luxury tourist projects which involve collusion with a World Bank. Financialization, ecological reparations from debt for national slots to carbon credits fail to provide resources to the periphery to reinforce the step burden and undermine the sovereign capabilities, perpetuating the domination, dependent surplus drain is prevention, but set carbon offsets incredibly worsen the problem in favor of the corporate system and perpetuate colonial imperial inductions.
You good?
Yeah, didn't get to the last card. Do you want the other card marked?
I know where we're going. Okay, we good?
Yeah.
Cool. Status the off or the alt.
Unconditional.
Unconditional. Great. Alt set. The card says quote that it would be emerge from quote language critique and performative practices developed in the public space and through queer multitudes. What are examples of those practices developed in the public spaces? That would be an example of the alternative.
Well, I think that the alternative has made maybe even a prior question to that. But we think in the context of this debate round, the practice of kind of exposing the informatic nature and the financialization of life in and through the 1AC process is probably a good example, and we'll give other examples of the alternative.
Okay.
However, the alternative, more broadly, before that, says that carbon markets take the form of a derivative, a bet on social differentiation. We have a sort of indite of that formation, and we have said that the alternative is to make a bet on something else, a wager on a new world.
What is the other thing you bet?
The possibility of a world that is not built on the financialization of
Okay.
units.
what evidence do you read that that world is possible or there is a possibility of it?
Valid evidence, and even if we don't have like statistics, which is what we've indicted for like New World Now
Okay.
or whatever, it is a bet we must make regardless to stop
Okay.
the perpetuation of the system of death.
How do you make that bet? Obviously, it is presumed in practices that assume that possibility. So back to the practices question, what would be practices beyond just exposing the 1AC?
Yeah,
That would be
so-
an example of taking that bet.
Right, decay is much more than just a refusal of the processes of the 1AC, but it is a form of like resemantization or re-legibility of how we understand data, how we understand value,
Okay.
that allows us to pivot to forms of conviviality, to forms of queer multitudes. That-
We change. What are examples of the way we now envision data, informatics, etc. as a result of
That's the link debate, right? Beller,
Well,
the top card theory
sure.
is how information
You have
is
said that the
racialized.
alt is alternative ways of thinking about data. I'm trying to get you to
Hang on,
pin down.
hang on.
Well,
It's not-
obviously
it's
that's
not
probably
necessarily
broad language.
alternative modes of thinking about data. Our argument is that information is not data. That's a conflation, right? Information is the quantification of social difference that is financialized in order to produce
Okay.
and accumulate like value, right?
Okay.
The world computer is a historically materialized machine of social differentiation that
Okay.
that actualizes global apartheid in the regional
Okay,
context.
I guess I'm still trying to get at the practices of the alternative that are all distinct from that. What is a different way of theorizing about how information is collected, what information should be
I mean,
collected, and so on.
right, Beller
So-
talks about
No, go.
Beller talks about this at the end of the alt evidence, right? He talks about conviviality. He talks about sort of new multitudes of mattering that don't rely on the death politics of the status quo.
Okay.
It is that bet that we may not know what the other world looks like, but we have
Okay.
to engage in
But
That-
we can
that's
see
fine.
glimpses of this
The-
world too, right? If you're looking for an example of the alternative, a great example of the alternative
Okay,
might
that-
be like,
that's good.
oh,
I-
okay, so you don't want the example.
No, I have one more question I want to ask. The extinctive politics link, is there any world in which the use of extinction can be good, so like trying to prevent it can
So
be
I don't think that that's responsive to the level of this link. This link is that extinction politics is narrated by the kind of man of Western reason, which ontologizes a presumption of that subject, and disappears the reality of genocide that constitutes multiple ongoing extinctions in and through the act.
10 minutes starting now.
Come on, does anyone know where it is?
Yeah, it's downstairs.
Yeah, it's downstairs.
I don't know where it is, but stop prep 210 used, so 750 left. These and this out.
I just sent it. The order is case and then the K. I'm just following case on one page. I don't know if y'all are separated.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know that I have this.
Oh yeah.
I'm good, I guess.
I am good.
Perfect. The 1 and C consider 2 impacts. First is warming. It causes extinction, anoxia, extreme heat, soil deterioration, and desertification are tipping points, making the earth uninhabitable. The impact is linear. Each threshold of emissions reduction dramatically decreases the risk of extinction. That's not is that outweighs the critique because human life is an intrinsic good, avoiding negative alliance with fossil fuel industry propaganda, and that climate change belongs on the back burner. Our research project is rock solid. We are a broad criticism of climate misinformation, use academic debate as a mode of reaching a social consensus on the existence of magnitude of climate change. Second is fish wars. Fish laws allowing extinction ends food access for billions, destabilizing nations, and making war inevitable. That's the curve evidence. They conceded the gap solves it. 1, energy demand internalizes the cost of carbon, decreasing overall demand for fossil fuels, ensuring a greener decision making. 2, low carbon innovation establishes market certainty via a carbon price that incentivizes green uptake and the hunt for the lowest cost options. 3, internationally pushes other countries to reduce emissions via a border adjustment, reducing leakages and incentivizing follow. And 4, efficient abatement to change the supply and demand side, which is the key to innovation and solving climate change. 1 and C. 1, we need specified substantial in the plain text counter-interpretation teams must specify the affirmative as far as the resolution specifies. For anything else is infinitely regressive and sets the burden for app specifications to infinite possibilities. We have about 9 minutes to read 1 easy, otherwise the 9 minutes would be entirely a plain text. It justifies the model of ACE being at every 1 easy. Cross-check checks, we told them how it was calculated in real world. No, a tax proposal says a static single price. Every one of them is based on a calculation at the time of the cost of carbon. That's a normal means for every tax app on the topic. Reasonability good is good enough. If the debate vote, affirmative. 1 and C2, 1 and C2. i.e. N is wrong, subpoint A leaking. Attack to energy markets is good. It causes internalization of the cost of a forced renewable transition, hitting at the market of production, ensures transition. B, it ignores empirics. Every deficit in this part is like past taxes failed and they didn't work because of inexorable emissions impacts in the U.S. not shifting. U.S. shift is key globally explained above. 1 and C3 will be answered on the K. I'll go there now. Okay, framework. Our interpretation is a suggestion to imagine the hypothetical implementation of the plan against either a competitive alternative or the static quo, and the links must be to that plan's implementation. Anything else lowers the bar for negative offense too low. 2, net benefits. First, fairness. You link, you lose, and muted the 1 and 2 breaks the game for the negative, creating resource disparity. Shifting the next is debate. It turns any net benefit to the game. Only the ballot solves. The second is clash. Comparing opportunity costs. It creates argumentative refinement. Alternatives turn defense and offense, and is a prerequisite to making their offense portable. The K proper. Permutation to both. Double bind. Either the alt can't overcome the links in the plan, or it's overwhelmed by the status quo. Overwhelmed by the status quo. The basis of the Peru evidence is wrong and rejects 11,000 scientists that collectively agree climate change is real, anthropogenic, and extremely threatening. This is not just a computer model. It is a physical and planetary phenomenon that is directly available to experience, that consider too many wards in the 1 easy chem evidence. Rising oceans, deadly heat waves worldwide, severe droughts, increased hurricane activity are all demonstrative that climate change is knowable and we are currently living through it. Well, impact turned their evidence. Calculative activism is good. They dropped that climate change is existential, so it was prioritized to target fossil fuel companies that are integral to emissions. It would be nonsensical to target a company that makes photovoltaic cells instead of ExxonMobil if the goal is to solve climate change. The PIS got evidence that belies the link argument that they have not made. We did not read a financial asset pricing advantage that carbon tax does not create models about what area of the world is likely to flood. So the affirmative does not cause the things in the evidence about insurance companies raising premiums or bolstering capital broadly. All the cap good stuff below will impact turn it. At best, this argument is a description of the static quo, and the app is still good. At worst, the alternative it does not solve it. They cannot win an impact to this critique without reading an internal link, which they did not have in the 1 in C. Will impact turn the extinction stuff portraying climate change as an extinction level threat is key to motivate action in the face of apathy, a lack of risk assessment, or slowing action, and creating faulty policies. And a meta-analysis includes fear is the greatest motivating factor. No apathy. Meta-analysis shows not a single study showed a single situation in which fear was counterproductive. That's the Davidson evidence, and extinction risks are truly universal and is uncritical to assume every indication of climate emergency protects wine. December 22. It becomes possible for humans to universally impinge on the purpose of all human beings while the remains necessary to universal things of the scrutiny, the power to kill life itself in their music critical think should not be hasty, including into the world's sources concerned about protecting right as the death of all humans. Become contingent universalized ability, nothing would be less critical to assume all appeals to be universality are roots of power critical. Theorists must trust new universality alongside the pragmatism of missing the parliamentary context which are political structures are being waged, and environmental decision making should be guided by contextual pragmatism reliant on hypothetical and empirical tests of political consequences. Ethical principles matter, but only as an instrument for guiding theories to concrete rectifications of concrete problems. Means here, Adeline for advocacy of takes ethical comes prior to the collection in a concrete situation in front of debilitating problems, even if a man agrees to act upon the golden rule that we still need to agree to arrive at the compatible conception of avoid. This rule means in a concrete practice, moral principle should be seen as a compromise in one property ingredient into a problematic situation. These times cannot pass capture only a particular aspect of the experiential situation in a context find struggling to harmonize or the reflection of any of their special emphasis that towards intelligent inquiry. A situation presented with something novel and unexpected. The alternative to principle is the urgent to not reduce normative to stupidity so much as it insists on grounding theory in real moral experience, all holding principles up to critical scrutiny with experimental inquiry. Empirically held values and are always open to appraise and are driven by particularized needs. Moral principles should operate very differently regarding problems of the years or instrumental is not the extent to which the no any special opinions right rightness and moral claims depends on their ability to contribute to a resolution of a specific situation to be shifted from preoccupation with ontological setting to towards refinement and conflict resolution to deny the existence of such principle and such with them in their proper place rather than a privileged class ethics principle of pragmatic conservative source from the empirical finds deliberating over alternative courses of action through hypothetical testing reason can take out inquiry and zero towards a resolution that receive a legitimacy from a deliberation or inability to random situation typical from harmonies and operative sport party claims metaphysical credentials human decision making involve hard decisions and variables among incentive structures and evaluation of environmental dynamic activity. It is important to understand the substance of Republican members' ethics and armed with benefit and enrich by the public community. And algorithmic governance is good as false crisis escalation of viola 19 autonomous weapons of democracy. Our party sending a criminal pressure way at bills and existence and those from the failures and empirical communication digital platforms emergence and indispensable tools for managing crisis. They help make decisions that advance in real time decision making and facilitate crisis determination and everybody systems to diplomacy given an inevitable demand for accountability humans retain control over the process. Algorithmic data processing are not ontological nor are they capable of replicating human subjectivity. They can be restricted via liberal social policies rooted for Adeline 13 power. Grass object of algorithmic mentality you no longer with your physical body but through multiple profiles and power. Having a digital rather than across with no way to means and data controls are ontologically never reducible to an organization data that nor totally under the government use apparatus their respective power understanding of the power of affairs is no longer about on the basis of incapacity some right about it. A T-subjectification about the same T-subjectification are equally wrong with the T-subjectification. As in no way self-evident seems to choose simplistic the transformation of produce T-subjectification on grounds that the intimacy and privacy laws predicting the data motive and race of inappropriate disclosures directing to events and intersective areas around the individual algorithmic governance inference to individuals focus on the R statistical doubles and other combinations of correlations and causative by default. The verification of the subjectification opportunities of product with the individual lives return to the avoidance of the subject and the difficulty to reduce algorithmic subject about themselves as such that characteristic of a knowledge producer is the emergent directive from the data without the process of the use of the knowledge being pre-existent, the hypotheses themselves are generated from the data of the action revenue from these processes will be close to action that are required by the environment within the individual themselves. The all fails, mark the card themselves. The all fails, cybernetic logics are ingrained, their critiques overly negative, and can't scale up. Calls for 14 seconds. This inescapably shaped by capital resistance to detect waves that can be challenged that are given the typically greater interaction with the attack and everyday practices to protective or possible to determine moderate and reductive distinctions we make between good, bad, and market safe society, physical, virtual, that become increasingly unrealistic attempts to systemize that with the capital become undesirable, also untouchable, understand organizing and overtaking errors that recurring as experimental approach to recognize and open of capacity for steps that take when it comes to into contact with social practices where theories must be constructive which organize a new assemblages a situation of specific interventions to critique as possible to point towards organism purpose on creating a new configuration that critique who assembles the reader and practice of parts not based on technical is disposed of itself project is not maintain replicability demonstrates someone's ability to organization politically elusive identity of your pound activists as subject is hard it's a terror determined. Can you give me an answer to card 2 in case? Using technical data information to drive policy making actually algorithmic governance is great. Coglianas and Lair in 1788 evolved the tax has IRS use machine learning use machine learning about medical advice and works of the MIT because MIT collaborated with OFR evaluating risk of the economic markets of the algorithmic converting financial product agencies recognize the importance of big data analytical perspective using the realize that states involved in data and digital wide environment big data $1 million increase in funding for efforts made on wide means and the creation of the LEI agents actively working with cloud storage and with what machine learning FDA leveraging cloud meetings working with the form pathogens give it the agency ongoing situated simultaneous capacity to collect control and analyze data. Mark the card got data. The alt fails global emissions. Alt can't more people in the plane's passage for fairness and prevents abusive finds FD allowing transition opposite feasibility contestation and collapse because it reciprocally centers stasis for comparison and convincing voluntary and productions and consumptions of possible Suscan 2014 growth possible in the real world. That leaders would have persuaded that it was in poverty or made of ordained and path majority from the reduced incomes would have been political doubt to be leave it. Otherwise would be messianic faith in supernatural perception. Jesus cannot convince everyone to go with their possessions. It is not like the easy growth is world that is distortion. No reason to argue that become tax and fees while to liberate recession is not and Growth is sustainable. 23 to go. To account for all mitigation, technically, given our R&D and renewables and our system and sustainable tech for 10 years. Conservation efforts were used by the federal state laws that would be accepted and offset. It seems so much that it does appear that EKC for GHGs, which moves only temporary stable acres, and there is evidence of democracy, so cleaner air, excessive pollution, or result of the on the price of corrective taxation or trading. I can contrast that with conscious high GDP, emphasis resources required for conservation, lack of property right to leave it to the tragedy becomes higher prices and return conservation. Mention new explorations.
Good job. Keep it up.
Cool. Alright, so you talked about AI governance being good, you talked about AI resolving crisis.
Yeah.
I guess, like, what's an example of AI resolving a crisis?
I'm not sure about like resolving a crisis per se. I think we've read 2 pieces of evidence that says
You said it
algorithmic
solves
governance.
crisis escalation, I believe.
Yeah,
Okay.
it says that it could solve crisis escalation
Oh, but we
and the
don't
fact
know.
that we can use artificial intelligence to place a cap on conflict and
Oh,
restrict
how
crisis
does AI
escalating.
place a cap on
Sure.
that?
So one thing that we have is the U.S. has a not like a ingrained no first use policy, but we
Okay.
wait until we have terrestrial
I get-
detonation, which we use
Okay,
AI for.
whatever.
We
I
use
wanna-
artificial
I
intelligence
wanna
and
move on.
surveillance-based
You
systems to
say
determine if a nuclear weapon is in
data
the U.S. That's
good
good.
for tech policy. You read articles about data good. I guess like square for me, data versus information is your argument that they're the same thing. Are you saying information good because data good? Like square that for me.
I'm not sure I understand the question. We have made a litany of examples of why data and algorithms are good.
Okay.
It allows the EPA to go after fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil and BP.
Data is great.
It allows the IRS to go after white-collar criminals. Those things are good. We've also made arguments for why information in the context of climate change is specifically key.
Okay, no, go. Shoot. I'm still good. Data or information in the context of climate change.
Yeah.
I guess how does data translate to information in the context of climate change?
I don't understand the premise of that question. We read 2
My
parts.
premise is
We
You
said
said
the
data good for
Davidson
climate
You
change.
said
evidence.
How?
The Davidson evidence and the card above that both describe how, if we describe climate change as an existential threat, use science as the backing for our claims, that it persuades individuals to 1, change their consumption habits, and 2,
Okay.
pressure companies
Okay,
like
you just brought up
BP to
some
change their
Davidson
practices.
evidence. I was reading through that. I actually want to ask some questions about that.
Sure.
Since it might be important. Okay, so this card is about a guy went to University of Michigan and had a discussion with a business owner.
Yeah.
How is this one conversation indicative of anything we do in policy?
The Hoffman evidence is describing their conversation with one
Sorry,
person.
Hoffman.
Yeah, so the Hoffman evidence begins by talking about their single conversation with a person from Michigan, and then scales that up to reflect how society writ large is acting towards climate change. So you can think of misinformation historically in the context of smoking companies being followed by misinformation from fossil fuel companies, where they're able to greenwash themselves and say, hey, we have a carbon offsets, we do all of these things
I
to
guess,
solve
like,
the problems when they don't
This
actually
was
solve
like an individual conversation. Is that reflective of policy debate? How is it a benefit? And here,
It
how
uses
does-
that as an example. It is not just about one conversation.
it's not just about
No.
one conversation.
Not at all.
Perfect. 17 second left. I missed. What's the benefit to Clash?
What is the
wording
benefit
in
to
the doc?
Clash?
What was the wording in the document? I missed it.
Comparing opportunity cost creates argumented refinement,
Cool.
alternatives for defense, and
Opportunity
offense.
Okay, that's done.
7:57. Sending out the cards. We also might have closed the card dock, or even locate it perhaps. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's not. Okay. Break night this time.
Yep.
Yeah, pause that. Okay, not framework. Framework's in the one.
Is there an overview of any subsection?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
One second, sorry.
Anyone not ready? Okay. Actually, silent. Okay. The world computer is a psychoeconomic machine of abstraction that collapses history and information into value abstraction, steering all informatic acts towards fascism and the planet towards collapse. Carbon tax flattens the most complex social and political issue of our time to a question of any counting problem. Balance the carbon books, which extend the world's computer's reach into the atmosphere. It's not that complicated. Shell and Exxon have been enthused to fund climate research for decades, not to save the planet, but because accumulating information lets them profit maximize every decision they make. Exxon's invention of carbon footprints reveals that genocide is the medium of every informatic message because climate volatility is big business. Theory of power shapes the debate. Information is the grammar of the world computer, proliferated by indexing and subjugating all qualities, race, gender, emissions to quantities to produce and accumulate value. Very important to note that information here is not synonymous with knowledge nor with data, but carbon taxes platform on the intensification of and calculation of social difference that writes off agency, aspirations, and desires as it liquidates all life into a pool of fungible value to be expended. They cannot win this debate, but they've conceded a thesis claimed by the racial unconscious. The grammar of information ties all choices that we make back to the anchoring point of profit. You should therefore be skeptical of what you have read as what they have read and you have read as rational in this debate, because the racial unconscious constrains the possibilities of what we think debate can be and automates our political conclusions in advance. The framework will be in the 1 and R. The first argument on the flow is the permutation. One is a reconciliation. To the permutation is nonsensical. The alternative requires a prior rejection of a computational mode of politics because you must divest your cognitive energy, which requires you refuse to do the work of reconciling the gap with our epistemic starting point. 2, all links are to SADs. They'll be below the impact, or in the case they don't get one, but 1 is the gray evidence says that when we adopt a vantage point of control over markets globally, it quote functions to obscure and invalidate other modes of political agency and modes of knowledge, which means that the permutation substantively resolves no part of our offense, and you vote negative. 3rd, the permutation therefore severs out of the F starting point and makes the F a moving target, which is a voter for negative. Prep and clash, there's no double bind. I'll explain the alternative below in the alternative debate. Now, the first argument is that the first evidence is that the merit evidence is wrong. This because they see carbon, they sort of see climate change as available to experience. They might, but the carbon tax certainly does not, which means that this argument is a negative argument. It requires the calculation of emissions and the estimation by experts, which is cross-ex of the one I see. They can't sort of sever out of that. The next argument is that calculation is good. I'll do the extinction politics. Link here. Extinction politics is narrated by the man of Western reason. This ontologizes a dogmatic presupposition that our lifestyles need not change, but that we can substitute our cars for electric ones, etc. And in fact, those lifestyles should be extended to others, which disappears the reality of the zero-sum nature. For example, green grabs, like the conceded card that they said they would answer at the bottom of the 2-1C, and they didn't get to child slavery to mine or rare earth minerals, etc. Even if they're descriptively right, the extinction outweighs, they cannot access that in this particular debate because they require the calculation of extinction through sort of floating signifiers empires that are always racialized and make allusions to colonialism, to colonialism, which reveals the sort of our argument that there's a racial unconscious that motivates these calculative forms of politics. When I see Camp 23, I think it's pretty fucked up, so I'm actually not going to read this, but it talks about how it gives a pretty graphic description of a Maori woman in some imagined future where extinction happens as the last human survivor. Now, extinction outweighs is non-responsive to decay because we've impact-turned their capacity to perform this computation. That is what the link is to. It aggregates utility at the population level and liquidates life, which is how the racial unconscious is calcified through those assumptions that we make. There are two impacts. One is eugenics. The claim that extinction outweighs even large-scale events like genocides reveals that computation was never content indifferent. It demands sacrifice of particular segments of the population to ensure the vitality of others. Two is alienation. The question of extinction begs a prior question about what it means to live. The world computer systematics evaluates quality of lives that are in a free fall towards zero through a relentless expansion of a global substrate, which the computational grammar of extinction politics disqualifies, which is their argument about how extinction is universal. It takes out that argument. They had dropped down to the Zimmer card. I'm going to answer their extinction answers just because it's answering this link. The first argument is fear motivates racism. In this instance, in and through the 1AC, you don't get access to that. Two, apathy, not our warrant, so it doesn't apply. Next argument. The next argument is the material card about ethics only matters insofar as the guy's action. That's our framework arguments, which we'll answer them there. But this is, but this demonstrates how they've sort of discounted the relevance of political starting points. We've also turned the sort of beginnings of their ethics. So if I win a link, it also takes out this argument. I will do the collateral lives like here. The idea that a carbon tax could solve rationalizes climate apartheid. It writes data into a price signal that determines how much tax is levied for, and therefore also the price of those things that are destroyed in and through the world of computers' calculative grammar. They perform this noisy cross-section. They say humans are rational consumers who make decisions in a marketplace to either produce climate change or to solve it. Their claim that, quote, people seek science proves the internal link between price signal and the ontologization of the form of the human in and through Western rationalist frames that we won are genocidal. This is the logic of sacrifice. Their honesty evidence concedes. They stack up a few million people against trillions of dollars. This is our argument that information becomes a financial speculation on the value of a few million people versus a few $1 million. What do you see? Linus in 20 says, quote, we need to be clear how the balance of cost and benefit stack on both sides in favor of keeping them 1.5 degrees Celsius higher. There's a probability of saving a few million lives in favor of dropping this possibility of saving a few $1 trillion. It's a tough choice, I admit. Extend Pittscott 17. There are two parts of the link. One is the price signal. The pull of computational reasoning is animated, racial, unconscious. I will make it less abstract. When sea levels rise, Manhattan will be protected by seawalls and surge barriers built straight through Brooklyn and southern Queens. This is because questions of how much we're willing to sacrifice and cost are always already questions of who we are willing to sacrifice. There's a prior question to extinction because it filters who survives in the world post-AFF. Two is climate data. We need to know who's consuming what. Those archives are profit maximized. Predictions of disaster become a business opportunity, like raising insurance rates in coastal coastal areas, which produces gentrification. The qualitative form of the content different price signal is a proliferation of human need itself unmet and denied. The link turns case because when I see Linus evidence says, quote, any carbon reduction program that is perceived as fundamentally unjust is doomed to fail. Now the next argument is the data is not ontological, but liberal social policies can solve it. No, the affirmative obviously does not do this because they're not a liberal social policy. That was the link debate above. The argument that the alternative fails because cybernetic logics are ingrained. It says that tech is shaped by capital in the first line of the card, which means that the alternative solved it. It's not inevitably claimed as an anarchist writing about why anarchic politics would be good to resolve them. That's obviously close to the alternative, then is the affirmative. The next argument is that algorithmic governance is good. This proves that they don't get a permutation. We've also impact turned the AI. I'll read the card that I sent here. AI is obviously bad in terms of solving crisis escalation. This is a new link, like Israel's use of AI in Palestine to identify threats from drone footage and then sort of attempt to produce like regimes of genocide and death. Abraham 23. AI enabled Israel to carry out its war in Gaza. The number of civilians is killed is calculated in advance. Something happens. We know exactly how much collateral damage there is, and every 100 resistance says food belts can generate targets automatically at a rate that far exceeds what previously possible. AI facility a mass assassination of the factory. All this is contrary to protocol used in the past. Affairs are aware of failure on October 7th. The building is derived from one image of victory. They salvage their reputation. They obviously don't get to look out of this argument because it's not an argument that the 1AC is good insofar as it is AI, but rather a general claim about how AI solves crisis escalation, which means that there's obviously a link because it's a general claim, not a specific one. So we get general claims in response. The next argument is the alternative fails. I will do the alternative here. The world computer automates our thought and action towards in and through racial unconscious. The carbon tax begins from the assumption that we must adopt a position of control over the globe and then tells you to evaluate the flow from there. Carbon tax is therefore the result of an epistemology and cosmology built on violence. Beller says that seizing the means of informatic reproduction requires a withdrawal or semiotic and affective capacities away from computational grammars of inscription and datafication that offload capitals proliferating contradictions onto the global majority, like the Zapatistas boycott of the Paris Summit or the Climate Coalition, retro the earth that emerged out of the refusal of the COP 27. So this opens up alternative modes of relation that says reimagine, value new organizational media endowed with agency and back to the socialities of the global majority. It's not a question of whether the alternative solves the AFF, as Beller says. You should change your metric for what solvency means. In informatic spaces like debate, we are at the center of the unsolvable. Your ballot cannot make a carbon tax happen. It can only reject taking a computational position of control, whereby you secure futurity for some through the sacrifice of others. Here's how it solves it. Spaces like debate, you can make the choice to refuse informatic proliferation that feeds the world computer and accelerates its genocidal consumption of populations globally, which activates the latent potential of debate as a meeting ground to proliferate alternative frameworks of value. The next argument on the alternatives, the alt fails because it can't solve global missions. I answer that above because you should change the threshold for what solvency means. The framework debate will also answer this. They say the alternative fiat is bad, and we don't fiat the alternative. Unclear what this means, but it double turns our framework argument that says that it all has to be fiated at a large scale and solve the affirmative, which proves, which demonstrates that that is not the threshold to which you should hold. To which you should hold. The Susskind card is like. The Susskind card says that convincing people to solve emissions like logically is impossible. I will do the mathematics of carbon link here. Carbon tax only makes sense through a top-down vantage point. This is Brian 17. It makes politics over a question of rational planning. I extended their argument from cross-examination to the one they approved the link. There are 3 impacts. 1, calculative activism. We come to believe that getting the math right ensures justice, but this manufactures consensus and multiplies injustice. For example, the oil company Egypt wants to be net zero by 2030 from a top-down vantage point, which is an unequivocal good, but the alternative calls your attention to the fact that it will achieve this by seizing land in Africa the size of South Carolina to fill with capture tech, which turns the case in also ways because it disavows and reaffirms the relevance of local. It produces things like for example, the UN carbon development projects that we talked about in that 1MC card about policing, which I'm sure Greg was. Yeah.
Good for cross-ex.
Yeah.
Is climate change real?
Yes, obviously.
Is it a physical phenomenon that affects us and we can feel?
So you don't get access to this argument that we interpret climate change as a physical phenomenon that we can feel, because the way that carbon tax solves is it calculates the financial cost of climate change, and then it uses those things to manipulate, right, like price signals, to manipulate consumers who rationally change their behavior. You don't get access to it's a real phenomenon when we are winning a prior claim that you abstract, right, not us.
Wait, why can we not win solving climate change is good? It is a justification of the claim.
So the argument that I said you don't get is the argument that you're setting up, which is, but the alternative denies that climate change is real, and we think it really is. But our argument straight turns that, because it's not a claim of how real you think climate change is. In fact, markets manipulate behavior in and through the sort of calculation of how much carbon has been emitted. So you don't get the argument that you are the realist about climate change.
So your argument is just like ExxonMobil will just lie about how much carbon there is?
Well, that's a piece of case defense that's going to be in the 1NR. The link to the critique is something else.
How is the link external to that? Because we've preempted that argument. So how's the link external?
So I disagree. So the argument is that in order to know climate change, the affirmative requires that experts, you're not sure who they are, right? That scientists somehow calculate what emissions are and how much they should be priced as based on the calculation of potential future innovation lost, of the changes to our lifestyles that would be required, which is in fact a mode of soft denial of climate change, right? That denies the impact at a local level and also denies our capacity to know and feel that, because we can only ever know and feel climate change in relationship to how much of a carbon footprint is this, how much am I going to be taxed if I turn the lights on, how much am I going to be taxed if I don't buy an electric vehicle, etc.
Why is there a trade-off between establishing a price and knowing how climate change affects people on an individual and communal level?
Well, because we've read a number of pieces of evidence that in fact say it does not work in this direction. It says, so the idea that
what card do you think says that? Is about a carbon tax or a carbon price?
The Pitt-Scott evidence is like super specific. I was
That
thrilled when I
is
found
about
this
things like
article.
financial companies raising insurance premiums. For
Those are impacts to the link. This is true. You've identified the impacts to the link, right? The link is about financialization, and that Pitt-Scott piece of evidence is about the financialization
I have another question, but that's okay.
climate change through carbon. Yeah.
How does the AFF prioritize saving money over people for like re-highlighting?
Well, that's probably the re-highlightings that I pulled. It's also all of this, I guess, what part of this do you think that...
Well, we have said that we should stay below 1.5 degrees and save millions of lives. How does the AFF prioritize money over people?
Because it comes to know the world in and through a price signal, which we have said is finite.
750.
order is framework on the K and then case. First, though,
I'm reading
gonna
the
read
2 and C
the
part.
2 and C cards. Whatever. Give me a minute just to get my documents up.
Is there a new doc or is it just the 2 and C card?
It should be sent. There's 2 cards. No, low key, probably not. You can read the second. We'll see.
So did you give an order? I just like.
Yeah, no. For 2 and C cards, Spencer didn't get to framework case.
Perfect. Cool. These are those cards that you sent as well? Yep, there we are. Cool. I think I'm good.
Alright. Most of this out here. Climate mass linked to its case, its self-ontologizing way of apprehending the world that writes out all political alternatives. King 20. Economic predictions using biases that misrepresent the literature not grounded in empirics. Long-run forecasts for poor economics and climate make up numbers to support pre-existing beliefs. The product is used to calibrate models that guide political response. The economic experts justify decisions, write reports by the IPCC, coordinate response, supply the conclusions they would carry more weight with politics and steps with growth than ecological warnings. Economics is the most dangerous hoax in history. Okay, on to framework. Our interpretations of once used in epistemic artifacts and the role of negative is to disprove its desirability. We get links to the academic and political platform on which they choose to build the 1 and Z. Top over your RFQ will not be the AFF gets the AFF and the NEG gets the K because that is judge intervention because it grants in their interbelief when there's no distinction between what you weigh and how you weigh it. The fact that judges are inclined to think this as middle ground proves our argument about the racial unconscious because there's no content indifferent model, but their disavowal of this in debate is how we are guided back towards the maintenance of an unsustainable world. Our impacts are illogical prior question to theirs because hypothetical impacts cannot justify the desirability of a system that predicts and values them. First is the virtual reality DA. Their model is a one-way mirror, presumes demand that we simulate and speculate and bet on how the world is shaped, but disavow how the world shapes us and predetermines our political risings. The impact turns their clash because when I see Beller says our policy discussions ascribe value on the bodies and lives of those over whom we deliberate. And there's a global apartheid DA. Evaluating hypothetical extinction impacts against epistemic ones is bad across scales of impacts to disqualify ours, which makes the global apartheid inevitable. Their 1 AC Davidson evidence is a great link there when they have arguments like, quote, fear-based messaging is effective at changing intentions, attitudes, and behaviors. This is fundamentally what our argument gets at because, yes, it does have an effect. These extinction politics do have an effect on how we change our behaviors within the debate space, but that is bad because that is how the sort of world computer overcorrects us against the sort of ethical modes of consideration and the wagers otherwise that we might want to engage in. This proves a link because we've sort of in-back turned on a fundamental level fear-based messaging. And there's an abstraction today. Their model captivates revolutionary potential by channeling it into a libidinal investment in crisis. They're not just going about what links to evaluate, but a value judgment about what impacts matter, which perfects us as computational subjects. Power 21. The cognitive ability commandeered in a feedback loop learning of life between work, attention, symbiosis, and second fall is massive. Abstraction transforms thought, time, reality, history, reality, such that humans themselves are the product of programs that abstract the world by syncing the numbers, cybernetics, program syncing, and subject form to feed the world computer. And the Hoffman evidence proves this link. They say, quote, with upwards of 2/3 of Americans not clearly understanding science or the scientific process and few are able to pass even a basic scientific literacy test. Not only is this line kind of scuffed because it poses an access to education that's like fucking weird and elitist, but more so than that, it is our argument about how the computational unconscious stratifies folks on the levels of form because we're winning a root cause claim about how the sort of climate algorithmic education is fundamentally shaped at a prior level by algorithmic logics that reproduce the world computer. That means the sort of science tests that their Hoffman evidence say are key in their discussions are the sort of science tests that reproduce this sort of algorithmic unconscious. The Hoffman evidence is an incredible example because read that discussion as like a fucking leftist, like, I don't know what they are, communist or some shit, that gets in a discussion with a fucking fascist from the market and then decides at the end of it, maybe they got a little bit of a point. This is our argument about why engaging in their discussion on their terms are bad because we come to these conclusions that we've implicated on the link debate are scuffed.
Straight transparency.
It's straight transparency because, and clash, which I'll get to in a second. On skills, this argument is bad, so bad that the fiat double-blind answers that their skills can't split up to resolve extinction and delete impact terms, their starting point, and their terms arbitrary and self-serving that severs the plan from its justifications and lets the AFF control the level of NEG offense, which impact turns fairness in education. The framework debate kind of answers a prior question to their interpretation about hypothetical implementation because we are winning a form-level question about how nodes of communication are traveled through the world computer, which means even if they win a lot of ticky-tacky little arguments on the framework debate, we are winning a prior question that structures how you perceive all of those arguments and turns all of them. That is sort of our argument about how the world computer forms computation. On to case. The 2SC is way too light in the case because they fuck up the core warrant of the IBN evidence, which means we're going for carbon taxes to reproduce racialized violence by affecting the most vulnerable populations first. Their taxes ultimately regressive because that's normal means that even if they try and shift out of this, their cards that show like consumers learn to turn the lights off. People become sufficiently scientifically literate. People buy EVs. Right, all of these are shifting costs onto consumers because corporations will do anything they can in order to keep the costs low. Heuristics and card doesn't account for, what was it, like adaptation or whatever. It's just non-responsive because the IAF evidence makes a lot of specific claims about how these taxes lead to things like strike breaking, union busting, breaching contracts. All are cheaper ways for corporations to shift the carbon tax, and this burden gets shifted onto the most vulnerable populations. This is also a massive on the K because it proves the AF has us makes a choice of which lives get to be sacrificed and which livelihoods must go to try and get these corporations to settle into fucking ethical. Second is empirics. History shows taxes don't change company behavior at all, let alone in scale and speed required to stop climate extinction. Dozens of countries have had carbon taxes for decades while emissions go steadily, but because companies factor them into business expense, even major price upsets fail. They try and say hashtag not our tax, but that's not responsive because the IN sort of supercharges this argument about Javon's paradox, which means even if we sort of diversify our energy resources, it fails.
Next card.
I'm gonna read this card.
Extend to the other card.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
the two examples. That they
Oh,
give you.
that's what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
And extending 1NC case 2, this frames their argument. Green colonialism, all the rest about AI governance good, says it's good because it doesn't view people as anything more than neutral statistics, but this is a fundamentally negative argument because that is a calculus that has us sacrifice some lives over others. All of their sort of spill out arguments are impacts for the negative because that is the way in which racialized capitalism gets extended. The UNDC programs, like the UNCDM projects for gas burners in rural areas of South Asia because using wood to cook emits carbon. Like, this is the process for colonialism. It's applicated across the world. Yeah. Am I looking for that document or not?
Negative. Y'all good?
Yeah.
Okay, you good? Warming clocks and extinction due to a confluence of tipping points to make Earth uninhabitable. It's linear. Each natural emissions in direction dramatically reduce the risk of extinction. That's the line. Is climate change is real, physical, and causes extinction we feel now. The only essential threat can solve anything else is unable to resolve climate change or the extinction threat of warming, which means it is a massive framing issue for this debate that outweighs the criticism because human life is intrinsic good, but it aligns with the fossil fuel industry propaganda that climate change belongs on the back burner. Our research project is rock solid. Or broad criticism of climate misinformation use negative debate as mode of researching on social consensus and existence and meant to do climate change. The first argument: corporations cannot lie about their emissions because the carbon output is falsifiable. They wouldn't push prices up because consumers would go elsewhere. There's no way they can go for a racial capitalism argument out of this by conceding this description of the status quo. The app causes a shift toward using less resource from far, less mining and minerals. The other argument, this frame argument is nonsensical. They cannot say that aid is value neutral, then that also causes sacrifices of certain populations. Obviously, contrary to the claim, AI governance is value neutral. The fact that it teaches everyone at the same data rotate, they cannot inherently create sacrifices for certain populations. They would not do that in the first place. All the other impacts stuff like K will answer that now. The K framework, the values are referendum, the hypothetical consequences of the plan, links must be plans, implementation must be all. The contrary cells are hard with inclusion of the plan, including that solvency. It's key to clash. Comparing opportunity costs is critical. The great argument for farming engaged in the literature. It's progress to making their offense portable, absent clash, and rigorous academic testing. Nothing is vetted for viability. Turns all of their offense again out when externalizing any answers to the data, informatics, etc. With that, the reason why it is exportable outside of this debate, they cannot happen because they do not allow for clashes. They do not grade or test the validity of the statement. The interpretation links to our offense justify. We cannot justify academic research about the consequences of the app. The only reason why we made the academic claims that we made in the first place is because we wanted to resolve the essential threat of climate change. Their model avoids that an obvious step by just focusing simply on academic claims without the effects and consequences of it. The virtual reality stuff focus on how we shape the world as good and should be prior. The question to all the virtual reality or how the world shapes its impact turned by the Minter evidence below. Our part does have no link. We don't disavow their impacts. It's a justification for ours. There's no reason why our interpretation says that they cannot weigh their impacts or use their evaluation, but only theirs excludes ours, which means there's only a reason why we cannot resolve or try to prevent warming. The abstraction does have turn debates about how the change about how we should change about our pollution should engage directly with politics or models not allow that distribute life. The critiques of academics are research and not actually engaging with the methods or consequences of the app, comparing the opportunity cost of the app versus the alternatives. The only way to access that returns and access their offense. The skill stuff is good and less affordable. Understanding and debate concepts and exporting all their ideas out if they're right about all the theory of power thesis nonsense about the informatics and information. Only we can access it by turning the way it accesses now. Perm do both. It doesn't need to solve the links because it solves the residual impacts. 90% of the offense about solving things external to the app and benefit outweighs the links. Except for nothing because we defend the plan and the 1AC extendment tier of their contextual practice in the hypothetical empirical test. The political consequences to decide what environmental practice to engage it in. The alter over correct ethical principle should matter insofar as it's an instrument. There are concrete ratifications of the concrete problems. Whether or not a moral claim is right depends on their ability to resolve a specific problem. Reject focus on ontological problems. This has algorithms to focus on pragmatics. It doesn't overdetermine or shut down alternative frames of solvency because there's no value in this debate of moral rights. Their moral rights and wrongs to how we solve the problem. The calculations link calculating the cost of carbon. Then life is good. The basis of the evidence is long. Rejects 11,000 scientists that collectively agree that climate change is real, anthropogenic, extremely threatening, and such as computer models of the physical and planetary phenomenon that is directly available to experience rising oceans, deadly heat waves worldwide, severe drought, increased hurricane activity, all demonstrate climate change is knowable and we are living in it, and we all impact and calculative activism is good. They drop the climate change is exponential, so it's try or die to target fossil fuel companies that are integral to emissions. We nonsensical to target a company that makes photovoltaic cells instead of ExxonMobil. Resolving climate extinction is good because it can only be established through resolving climate violence by calculating the damage. Portraying climate change as an extinctionable threat is key to motivate action in the face of apathy. A lack of risk assessments are slowing down action, creating faulty policies. The meta-analysis concludes fear is the greatest motivating factor, no apathy. That's the David evidence. Calculating the cost of the climate change damage is not the same as calculating which lives are worth value, which ones can be sacrificed. They are conflating something with a distinct difference and not having internal links to it. There's no reason why calculating the reasons why climate change will be bad and the cost of carbon emissions is the same as calculating which lives ought to be sacrificed. It cannot win this argument without an internal link. It cannot just conflate the two because calculations generally are bad. The extinction sub-extinction outweighs its irreversible because they find it suffering from climate change. Climate change is the universal and kills everyone. The same evidence says that it is a universal threat that ought to be prioritized. There's no reason why because eugenics affects everyone. Prioritization on climate change affects minor marginalized populations as well as every population in the world, which means that no extent is good. Mintier answers the rest of the other argument on extinction. Now ways which we extended above the Pittscott link, but it belies the link argument they have not made. They did not but we did not redefine internal asset pricing. You ready to take carbon tax does not create models about what area of the world is likely to flood, so the AFF doesn't cause these short companies to raise premiums or bolster capital bets. The description is status quo that the AFF is still good and of course the all doesn't solve. They cannot win an impact without reading an internal link. Their carbon tax link is long. They drop 4 to AC wars. It doesn't want AC cards the carbon tax is able to solve. It's just consumers demand, which forces companies to change their supply and we tax the shit out of our companies for them to directly diversify into renewables or go under. Algorithmic governance is good, which impact turns a large theory of power, solves crisis escalation on autonomous weapon systems, require higher burdens of escalation, which would never be mad, means that for escalation would never be mad, which means that after massive detonation it would never escalate conflict, which prevents this calculation from spiraling. This visual evidence algorithmic data is not ontological, does not replicate human subjectivity. You cannot reduce people and human subjectivity data books of data. It's far too simplistic. Value neutral claims about governance is a reason why it cannot create sacrifice, or the entire theory of power is wrong because it would imply, which is the Rubor evidence. The AI link is wrong. It's the A is not a link. It's descriptive of the status quo. Actions that AI is doing now. B, the ad doesn't cause it. It does not mean Israel increases AI governance of people in Gaza or Palestinian people. 3, AI in the context of the AFF and the theory of power. The we've impact term is good because it says that it would create, it require higher burdens for escalating conflict, which is good. The alternative fails. 2, warrants. 1, cybernetic logic, so ingrained and overly negative critique cannot scale up. Only we are overly reliant on technology, which we cannot change tech out or practice because we are heavily reliant on them. Second, we can't solve global emissions. The U.S. is large but not larger than China, India, or Africa, and account for massive amounts of emissions absent international solvency emissions. In one reason, inevitable because the AFF is a disadvantageous alternative. Don't change your frame for solvency. The 2 and C. It's nonsensical in that claim that if climate change is real and bad, then vote after trying to take the leap to try and solve it rather than just assume that we could solve it in another issue without a frame for that.
How much prep do we have, Greg?
We got 757.
Okay, you good?
Yep.
Yeah, alright.
Yeah.
Or do you not know that? Okay. Okay, proper. Okay. Anyone not ready? There's no cards, obviously.
Wait, okay.
Having the flow spread out sounds crazy. One of my debaters does this, and I'm always like, Allie, don't do that. But you know what? Maybe she has a point. Okay.
Wait, what did they do?
Spreads out the flows like across the table and like
Oh, I
moves
could never.
between them.
I could never.
Okay. Alright. The world computer is a psychoeconomic machine of domination and value extraction. Its informatic grammar manifests a racial unconscious that requires the sort of destruction of life and programmatically unequal distribution of life chances, materializes a system of global apartheid and accelerates the planet towards its inevitable collapse. That's 1 and Z. Beller, the concession of the racial unconscious through all AFF speeches in the debate is damning. It proves that the medium of politics is its message, like the conceded example of Shell Exxon's climate research, so that no matter the goals of climate tax, its informatic form is profit maximized to make extinction and genocide inevitable. They think that this debate is about a question of who solved climate and who is sort of better at doing climate science, but they have it backwards because iterating over extinction in and through this rational grammar naturalizes the digitization of all life that is at the heart of things like the climate extinction that they describe. So try or die goes negative. Their best argument is that algorithmic governance is good, but they're so far behind on our impact turns to this claim that there's no shot that they win it. We've won. The system requires intellectual labor to continue, so the alternative is a withdrawal that seizes those informatic means of reproduction, because Beller says you should change the threshold for how we solve a debate. They've conceded your ballot cannot actualize a carbon tax, which is kind of cheap. It's kind of an obnoxious argument, but the one I seriously need to answer it. So all we need to win is it withdrawing our imaginative capacities in the face of the world, from the world computer. In the face of that violence is generative of political agency and rising. We have 2 conceded examples about this apathy and the wretched of the earth. Protests against Paris and COP27 demonstrate how this epistemic rupture is a prior question. Now, framework debate, Cogwell, tender interpretation. We have one, a theory about power about the world computer. The proves framework goes negative, claims their model is content indifferent, clash and fairness that trains us with a neutral set of skills, disappears how this digital grammar predetermines our political horizons. Therefore, you should value the one to see as an epistemic artifact. It is not a carbon tax. It is Kansas's conclusion after a summer of research. So you should not treat your ballot as having any bearing on whether on extinction. I'm going for which dissent. I'm going for the extraction. I'm going for the extraction dissent. This is I'm going for the extraction dissent. It is too good for them to drop. Hypothetical impact, extinction impacts, cohere the politics through a grammar of crisis. To vote affirmative under their model, you would have to weigh the case impacts against extinction and then conclude that endorsing a future of colonialism, policing, and war is a logical price to pay to avoid extinction. But when you conclude that, you will have no choice but to vote negative, because that calculation proves our arguments about the racial unconscious, how it motivates politics, automates thought and decisions to accelerate genocide, which is both a dissent to their model and a sufficient reason to vote negative, even if they win a risk of clash or fairness, because this kind of comparison that they said, you weigh the app against the alt, is the link. Remember, your RFD is not a middle ground that grants them the F and S the K. That's arbitrary interventionist and links the dissent I did above. We are also winning a global apartheid. It's that carbon tax cannot be separated from Exxon's research on warming and the profit maximization crisis, which impacts the content of their clash. But you should not strive to maximize clash, because some kinds of dogma are good. Not everything is worth iterating over. Proven on the link debate. So beating theory powers a prior question to winning framework. I will clean up a couple of arguments on the line by lines. You said the interp makes claims based on consequences wrong. You've conceded a one or a preempted that. That's not how it works, because hypothetical impacts cannot justify the value of the ethical system in which they gain coherence. So we are obviously a logical prior question. They say debates about the revolution must engage politics. Begs the question of what kind of politics. Now the perm debate. I will I'll drop down perm. Whatever. They say that the net benefit is the AFF impact turning on the link debate. They have conceded also that the permutation severs, which, and because it impact turns the alternative, so you should not grant it to them. It solves no part of this, because they have demonstrated that they think things like algorithmic governance are good, and so you should not trust them to adopt the permutation. It also writes out and over those things, which is the extinction dissent I did on framework above. They say ethics makes conclusions based to solve real world problems. This proves our argument about how their model makes a prior claim about what impacts matter, or reveals that this is not the sort of rational, or that they are not willing to change on this, but rather motivated by a racial unconscious. They say there's no no value in infinite critiques. This is a link to our argument because it demonstrates that they sort of see these things insofar as they have a capacity to actualize things like markets, which is bad. Now the link debate, I'll do it here. I'm going for the Bray 17, the Bray 17 card. Says that when you adopt the global scale that carbon tax requires, it disavows the relevance of the local by as a site for action, but also as a site for violence. It leads us to overlook how those global level calculations done by scientists in some hinted mode of informatic production. They cannot specify when I see cross-sex reproduces racialized terror and genocidal violence from Israel's use of AI by Palantir to companies profit maximizing climate data, high cost for medical tech, for asthma and heat strokes, to gentrification, from raising insurance rates on coastal areas. Carbon tax's global scale of reference inculcates a logic of sacrifice. They keep saying we don't have an internal link, but I think it's clear not only through all these conceded examples, but also through the 2NC re-highlighting their Linus card. This is we should need to stack up a few million lives against a few trillion dollars and make a tough choice, which demonstrates the way in which they sacrifice certain people. That's our argument about how search barriers will to protect Manhattan will be built through Brooklyn and Southern Queens. Conceded, so they should not get access to it. The next argument is extinction is universal. By and large, answered on the framework debate above, but concession of our rehighlighting camp evidence is damning. Right, you should read all their claims about extinction in this round, specifically through the rehighlighting sent out about the graphic description of Maori women dying proves they don't get access to the claim to universal humanity and everybody dies, because even this supposed universal is read through colonialism. Colonial logic so the unconscious that undergirds extinction better. So even if every invocation of this debate is neutral in a vacuum, that the context of the 1AC proves our link, because we can only imagine the death of the West, because we've seen that extinction executed against the global South time and time again, which is also projects how we imagine it into the future. The Pitts got evidence of not going for a proper across the relevant work above, but they've also conceded a turns case argument, because I read a rehighlight that says that if it's perceived as unjust and won't solve, the carbon tax is not solved. I will extend the card that Gray read in the Wonder Art was on the carbon mathematics link. This is the card that says neoclassical economics failed. Gotcha. The economics is junk science. Yes, link supply and demand theory is garbage. It's applied to modeling to focus on consumption, but those models diverge so drastically from the real economy that they're useless. Two, structural blinders analysis is geared towards profit, because economics is a revolving door between academia that makes it politically useless. It can't predict a crisis. It can't solve it. The arguments about AI at the bottom, I don't understand how you don't think you link, because you have said that that all of that AI is good, but that's a general thing, so we get a link to a general thing. I did the alternative debate at the top.
140. 140 starting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay. Yep. It's case and then K. Cool. Okay, everyone's good?
Yep.
Great.
When you leave this debate round, you leave knowing that warming is real. It is a physical phenomenon that human activity is the cause of, which causes mass suffering and violence globally, and will only get worse absent a shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energies now. For a collection of over 11,000 scientists with the backing of both data and physical factors like increased hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, floods, rising sea levels, etc. You also know that the Earth is headed for a greenhouse state now. Methane bombs, melting ice, and tree dieback release sequestered emissions and lower the planetary albedo. You should not take the chance of finding out what it takes to cook the planet alive. They cannot win algorithms or data or information. The context of climate change or a carbon tax is bad, which is why the 2NR is going broadly for algorithms bad in the context of surveillance, or about Israel, which is not a thing that the affirmative justifies. Because every metric for evaluating climate change relies on some level of data, e.g. comparing intensity of droughts and wildfires in 2024 to 2000 is an example of data and analytics. We have read a collection of scientists, policymakers, and analysts with prototypes of both the Linus, which is our impact card, and their studies, and all that all prove the thesis of the 1ECE is rock solid. We have also read a dozen solvency cards that says that a carbon tax is solvent, and the only way to get other countries on board with reducing emissions, which was conceded by the 2NR, so you can just 100% solvency, which takes out any offense that they go for in the 2NR. Any offense they go for in the 2NR. Yes, the case outweighs. I'll answer the extinction K on the K proper, but human life is an intrinsic good, and voting negative is aligning with fossil fuel companies and the propaganda about climate change should be belonging on the back burner. Our research projects are ironclad. We have a broad criticism of climate misinformation and use academics debate as a mode of reaching a social consensus on the existence of and magnitude of climate change per a litany of authors, which I'll extend on the K. The K. Their overview. Their overview is wrong. They could be right about the thesis, but if we win that a carbon price is able to solve climate change, which is an uncontested claim coming out of the 2NR, then you can vote affirmative flat out, because there is zero risk that the affirmative causes any of the impacts that they have gone for in the 2NR. The AFF is not just profit maximization at the expense of people, which is how they framed the link in the overview. It is a death knell to oil companies and forces a transition towards renewable energies. The 2NR sounds persuasive, but lacks the solvency deficits to case needed to make their arguments viable. The 1EC had four warrants for why we saw why we solve the AFF. It forces companies to transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable. It causes international adoption of renewable energies, which is able to transition China and India towards renewable energies, etc., which is sufficient to solve. So this overview is nonsense. We do not need to win that you literally implement a carbon tax after you walk out of the room, because we're winning the academic understanding of climate change. What we promote in this round by tying existential climate change to a policy proposal that is pragmatic and solvent is good. There's the 1EC, there's the 2EC mid-tier evidence, and the 1EC Hoffman and Davidson evidence, the Hoffman and Davidson evidence framework. Our interpretation is the judge should imagine the hypothetical implication of the plan against either a competitive alternative or the consequences of the affirmative. Anything else lowers the bar for the negative offense too low. I'm extending clash. It's a model of debate that prioritizes predictable engagement over germane opportunity cost, which develops more informed scholars with revolutionary convictions and ensures genuine reciprocal dialogue over their impacts, climate change, and policy. It turns all of the offense that they've gone for in the 2NR, picking any corner of the research library with zero ties to the plan or the action of the advocacy statement of the 1EC. It denies any of the app's ability to engage with their scholarship, which causes endless debates and a substance crowd, instead of getting to the heart of what we should do to solve climate change, which was how they framed the sort of extraction TSAT in the 2NR. The process of debate encourages adaptive research and refines itself into ethical and in-depth solvency. I'll extend the mid-tier evidence here. You should use a contextual pragmatism and hypothetical and empirical tests of political consequences to decide what environmental practices that we should engage in. Ethical principles should matter, but only insofar as it's an attempt to solve a concrete problem through a concrete strategy, which the 2NR has not done. They could be right about their moral claims, but without tying into a specific advocacy statement, i.e. how does a carbon tax make any of the problems worse that they have described in the 2NR, then you should just vote affirmative. You should reject their overview about the ontological status of algorithms and instead focus on pragmatic. The affirmative certainly does not cause any of those things to be worse, and instead they cause endless debates over whether or not those ontological statements are right or wrong, which ignores the fact that we need to solve climate change now. Does not overdetermine or shut down alternative frames of solvency, but there's no value in having those endless debates explained above. The apartheid TSAT no link. Our interpretation does not disavow analysis of their impacts, but rather a comparison with the solvency of the affirmative. The content of our clash is good. Informing damns the world to infinite suffering, that it's a reason that attempting to resolve it can be good, but it can only be evaluated by weighing the offense of the affirmative. The abstraction TSAT, they dropped that we turned this. Debates about revolution must engage with the nuances of policy and action. When they do not do, it means that they cannot get this price of avoiding extinction nonsense, because they have equally not engaged in the price of not doing the affirmative. affirmative. We have A, impact term calculations in the context of climate, and B, red defense about value neutrality, which was also dropped. Algorithms are value neutral, which means that there is not a cost or bodies that are sacrificed. The extinction debate, extinction outweighs its irreversible and causes truly universal infinite suffering. Climate change affects every population. Flooding destroys cities, causes climate refugees, colonial violence, and mass suffering through heat waves and marine population die-offs. That truly universal focus is good. It affects everyone. We face these calculations good because it prioritizes our energy source reversing emissions, emissions and climate change. We do not calculate what lives ought to be sacrificed by saying we should calculate the cost of carbon. There's no link between the two, and they red card 0 on this. I'm extending permutation to both. They say that if sappers, you should ask what part of the plan is to sapper. We defend the carbon tax and climate change being existential. The only other taste that they have to the permutation is the link, which the net benefit clearly outweighs. The permutation solves all of their residual offense, e.g. the 2 and R is going for, like, Israel's AI is bad. The permutation obviously solves that. The link, profit maximizing climate data now by raising insurance rates. Israel's AI over Gaza are descriptions of the status quo and not something that the plan causes. The affirmative is solely about a carbon tax, which they did not extend the only link they had, which was in the 1 and R. No way the affirmative makes either of those worse. The Linus link is wrong. Think back to truancy crossings. Our highlighting says prioritizing money over lives is bad. He dropped that we attempt to solve climate change to keep it below 1.5 degrees and to save lives. No colonialism link. They're talking about an underlying portion of it. We've universalized climate change, which is good, and did not do any of the colonialism stuff, which they've said is bad. That was a problem. Good debate.
Would you like a card now?
I got them.
Okay.
But just clarity, 2 and R, 2 and
Me, Spencer.
Two A's Ethan.